Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Huddersfield Town Social, if Talk will ever let me record this. Well, we like to call it the Ideas Podcast these days, because we're full of them, and I'm glad to see that the club are trying to take on board some of our genius thinking. Anyway, my name's Marah, Cameron Pope, and Ian Kilroy join me yet again, and Kaye's finished the cricket season, so he's much obliged to be back on the podcast. As we look back on another week in the soap opera that is Huddersfield Town, and just like Brookside, we're waiting for the body to be found under Canal Side. But first, we'll start with the 1-1 draw with Rotherham. As Ian rightfully predicted, they sat back. Town struggled to break them down. It took a 90th minute own goal, even though the club tried to claim it was Pieper, to get something from the game at the New York Stadium. Gentlemen, what do we make of that game? Ian, I think we need to start with you. I know Cam's always first, but Mystic Ian, you can tell you're going to be a semi-pro manager one day.
It's exactly as we thought it would be. Rotherham came. Well, we went to Rotherham and they just sat really deep. Last year, we couldn't break teams down at all. And for all the guff being spoken, the squad is pretty much the same, with a couple of improvements in the starting 11 and a few more weaknesses across the squad. But we knew going into the season that if teams sit deep, we don't necessarily have the creative players to break them down and create chances. And now Rotherham sat deep and we didn't really create too much, especially in that first half. That was pretty awful, but we'll skip that and move on to the second pretty quick. But we've come out of that. After going a goal down, we've actually got a point out of it. And now I only see that as a positive, even though with the 70% possession and the lack of clear-cut chances to actually come away with a point after going behind for the first time in quite a while, I think. That is trusting the process. That's what I'm doing right now. Because every week that goes past, we're seeing a little bit more. This week we saw for the first time that the lead style, the Johnny Hogg, the number 6, dropping deep into centre back and playing as a back three and letting the wing backs push forward. Now I think that was a little bit to do with Rotherham sitting so deep, and that allowed us to do it. And I don't think we'll be doing it just yet so often until we've got the right guys in. But Sarr made a massive difference at centre back, didn't he? He was a presence. And he just did things that between Schindler and Stearman they haven't really done this season. I thought, for a game against a team that's already got 4 points, well, it's good. It's good. You can't get upset at only taking a point, regardless of how well you played. The problems with the lack of goals is something we're all aware of. Everyone's aware of. The club must be aware of it now. And it might take to this 96th minute, but when you're pushing like we did all game, it just shows the belief every single player has in the system, and that every single player believes in each other and the coach, because that is a difficult thing to do. When the wing-backs are pushing on that far and underlapping and overlapping, the wingers are intelligent enough to allow the full-backs to do so and still drop in for a little bit of cover. Rotherham broke once against us on the counter-attack, even with us nearly playing a back two at times when Hoggy took the ball forward. They didn't offer anything, and we just did. We just kept going. Clear-cut chances out there. All we have is the underlap to the wing and the pull-back to the penalty spot. But it's a point. And we got 4 points now. It's more than we got through 9 games last season. So it really is a decent start. And with a week left of the transfer window, we really could be okay if things fall into place this week.
Well, lads, for me, I mean, I echo a lot of Ian's sentiments. Few of the occasions on which a draw felt so much like a win. So, and you know what, gents? I'm going to break with tradition, right? I'm not a stickler for historical constraints. You know, I don't care much for rules. I don't eat fish on Good Friday. I take the lift to the first floor if I can't be asked, and I'll actually admit it. I enjoy watching Huddersfield Town on a weekend. I had fun on Saturday at 3:00. I actually enjoyed myself, right? And I know that's going against the grain. That's not been something I've been able to say in a while. But I had fun, okay? And all right, Rotherham were poor, abjectly so. Newly promoted. They didn't test Ben Hamer at all in the second half and very little in the first. But even so, you know, credit where credit's due, we saw a lot of plus points that Ian's just touched on. Attempts, we simply got the ball into the box more, into the right areas. A header wide from Diakabi late on. Koroma had 2 back-to-back chances. That lovely lofted ball over the top from Eiting there. He was really unlucky not to, a better day he finishes that or he squares it. Okay, yeah, the finishing leaves a lot to be desired. It always has. That's not going to change in 1 week. It's not going to change with the same crop of players, I don't think. And our expected goals was actually down below 1 again. I was quite surprised to see that, but there's still work to do. And we can't afford to be that wasteful against better sides, e.g. Swansea after the international break. However, we look menacing and we actually deserve that goal. And okay, that probably wasn't the goal that we deserved, because I mean, that shot was probably ended up in workshop, but somehow it managed to find its way into the back of net. Only problem is, wasn't consistent. We didn't get into the attacking third enough in the first half. Campbell was dropping back quite deep, and I'm no tactical genius. That's not really my field. But with a lone striker, I don't think something's going right there in the build-up play if the lone striker is having to drop so deep out of the attacking third to pick up the ball. Thankfully, second half we looked a bit more convincing. So it's certainly not the finished article, but for me, again, step in the right direction. The fullbacks were mobilised again. We saw just how effective people could be once more. Like we've said, seeing the centre halves overlapping into midfield, that's something new, a bit of a new facet that we hope to see a little bit more of. It's like they're growing into this new system. So for me, and my takeaway from this Saturday, the system works and it looks good. So where are the rest of the players we need to deliver it properly?
Yeah, I'm not particularly a tactical genius like you, Cam, but even I noticed the change. There was one point in the highlights that I watched, because I'll be honest, when we got 1-0 down, I tweeted, "That's it, game over," and went off to hang some pictures, because I genuinely presumed that's how things work with Town at the minute. We go 1-0 down and that's it, forget it. So I wasn't watching it, but I went off to do some DIY around the house and was pleasantly surprised when we got something back. But I noticed that at one stage there was an attack down the left-hand side, probably Toffolo crossing the ball in, and we got 5 or 6 yellow-shirted players in the box, and that we haven't seen that for 2 or 3 years. Now, I'm still mourning the loss of the Kaye brothers. I think they were lovely, wonderful people, and I don't think they deserved what they got, but I could see a change in that. The full-backs pressing on, what I saw, I really, really liked. And I think if he's given time and space to get players in, as Ian said, I think we'll be able to do something with it. I didn't see him crouching down, which really annoys me on the touchline when he does that. Just stand up, man. Stand up and do the thing, stood up. Why this crouching down thing just because that bloke up the road does it and have a bucket next? Don't want that. But carry on with this pushing forward thing. It's quite enjoyable. So, yeah, I just love to be in a stadium and see it happen. And just watching it on the screen is just not the same. But yeah, as you've all said, it looked like there was progression. Looks like they've all bought into it. We look to be really busy. Carol Lighting, I'm really impressed with. Going back to the Forest game, he played a couple of beautiful balls into whoever it was, probably Campbell. Really struck it really well. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for him. I think he's gonna, if he can stay injury free, he'll be a good. But yeah. A good point. You take a point away from home, wouldn't you? No matter who it is. I think all this teams like Rotherham, that's just disrespectful. But I enjoyed what I saw.
Naby Sarr made his debut, and he's probably marauding forward a little bit like Joe Lynch used to. I mean, we saw it in the highlights, but there are definite signs of some form of DNA which are slowly coming together. And Sarr and Toffolo are probably going to be most key in driving us forward, probably in the next couple of months at least, because you're going to have one of Schindler and Stearman on that right-hand side. I'm not sure they can quite play the same game, and Hogg can play in that deeper role well. But how do you guys rate the debutant, Sarr? Because I thought it was quite good.
I thought it was fantastic, Greg. I thought it was clear to see why we've brought him in. And if you remember from the first couple of games in the season, both Schindler and Stearman were both really manhandled a corner and crossing. And now looking at Naby Sarr and his build, he's not going to be manhandled by anyone. He won't lose a header, I don't think, all season. He was set. So when you defend corners, you can do it a couple of ways. You can go man for man, or you can do zonal. And if you look at what Town did with Naby Sarr a little bit, is they left him pretty zonal on the edge of the 6-yard box. And what his job is just to go out and clear it with his head. So you don't have to necessarily mark anyone. It's a pretty loose marking, even if it is. And he just goes and meets the ball and gets rid of it. Unfortunately for their goal, that's what he actually did. The corner came in and he clears it. And Rotherham recycle it and get it back in after Fraser Campbell doesn't go out and close down the midfielder when the balls come back in from the right-hand side to Ben Wiles, I think it was. To be fair on that, actually, Naby Sarr's made a bit of an error. It might have been a fantastic debut all the way around there, but if you look, Fraser Campbell doesn't go out and meet it. And with the shot going in, Naby Sarr, the ball goes past his foot. And for me, he didn't even move towards it. And that's an error, but he's a big lad and he hasn't played for quite a while. So that might be a nitpicking, and without seeing the footage behind the goal and the proper footage from all the 22 cameras, I think, or something on the game, it's hard to, it may be a bit unfair to point out, to pick on him for that. But you can see it was what we needed, because we were getting out muscled in the centre backs, and you didn't expect that with Stearman and Schindler. But again, they've got a little bit older, maybe that's the case. But as debuts go, for me, I thought it was bang on. I think you can see already that there's going to be some fun moments there. There was a little long ball that went in, and he headed it back to Hamer from about 35 yards backwards without looking at who was behind him, and that was bold, and it worked. And then he put a Hollywood pass about 50 yards across field, I think, to Pippa for absolutely no reason at all. Again in the second half, and those moments, they're entertaining. Cam, that's what when I see a centre back playing the ball around like that, I love it. Because not many centre backs can. Problem is you get caught a little bit by doing that, and I imagine he will do. But for the issue we had with no centre backs that were really dominant, even just in one game, he was definitely that, and he made a big impact. And with a team like us, where we don't really have many players that can do that anymore, maybe they could 3-4 years ago when it comes to Schindler and Hogg and all the leaders we had then. Straight away, to me. Again, Rotherham sat deep, so it's not necessarily a game you can judge too much on. It really is a one-off, because we won't play against many teams. It's all right saying we should be beating teams like Rotherham. Most teams in our division will be coming to us saying that, oh, we should be beating teams like Huddersfield. And they won't sit back so deep against us. They'll try and break us down on the attack a little bit, unless they're struggling at the bottom of the division and they want a cheap little point. But that game was a one-off. But in that game, our defence looked much improved because of the debutant. And Josh Mash and the transfer committee look pretty good for me so far this season, with Pippa, Eiting and Naby Sarr. So maybe we've been a bit too harsh on them recently, boys.
Well, we said credit where credit's due, that we would praise when it was needed just as much as we feel like we should criticise when it's called upon. And so, yeah, look, the players that we've brought in. Sarr, okay, 90 minutes, a good 90 minutes. Eiting, you can tell there's definitely something there. Really impressed with Pippa. So, yeah, I'm thinking, all right, so far, good dealing. Problem is, there's just not enough of it. But that's another story, and I think that's something we'll get onto. But for what we have done, the limited business we have done, so far, to me, it looks pretty spot on.
Natural segue. I think you've all said it. Andy said it earlier. It's the final third, and I know. Is it Josh Koroma or Koroma? That's one of the arguments that need to be set. So,
well, I always thought it was Koroma because we'd heard it all the way through, and then the first time I heard Koroma was from when I watched the highlights this morning on like the EFL's feed, and I've never heard Koroma before then. So I'm going to stick with Koroma. I feel like too far in, but I as for an actual accurate portrayal of his name, I'm none the wiser.
Right. Well, we're going Koroma because it's more Yorkshire. That's settled. Anyone else is wrong. He had a couple of opportunities. I think he's had the second amount of shots in the league. Hasn't scored yet. Ian, you're in the fan club, but I've got my reservations about him. There's definitely something in there. We're lacking quality, but it's quality in that final third, and we saw Fraser Campbell working hard. He created a couple of chances, quarter chances, half chances out of nothing yesterday. We were here a week ago, and I think we were all expecting some movement in the transfer market with. Mr. Carlan Grant expected to go to West Brom. On what deal? We're yet to know. There's rumours of a loan to buy. We shall wait and see on that. Terence Congolo has been linked with Sheffield United, who seem to be going through the same second season syndrome that we did, but bought some better players than we did, to be fair to them. Them two going out, you'd expect with everything else that we'd have some kind of movement with some people coming in, but there's been nothing. There's been barely any rumours on anything. Is that a good thing? Well, who knows? I think it still stands. We need a striker, we need a winger, we need an attacking midfielder. Until we get those three players, we just don't have the strength and depth, because, again, taking Ian's point from last week, you look at the bench, very little that we could change yesterday. It's going to be a big 8 days for us. I mean, it's going to be difficult for the club if nothing much happens in the next 8 days.
Well, I'm sweating on this a little bit now. Look, we've spoken in previous episodes, and we could just copy and paste really what we want from transfers, what we think we're lacking, and we're all buying in now to this philosophy that Carlos has brought. But it's quite clear that we're too thin on the ground. We've just had a spate of injuries. We've lost, obviously, a vital part of the defence in Christopher Schindler. Okay, not as vital as it might have been before the arrival of Naby Sarr, but still someone that you want fighting fit and ready for action. Danny Ward, we've not really seen him this season. So, okay, and that's long-standing injuries. Lewis O'Brien's not played a part yet. So if this is what we're going to be contending with, we need to have a contingency plan. And so I'm not going to drag up exactly what we've quoted in the last few episodes, because everyone knows what we need now, what additions we ought to be bringing in. But the lack of traffic is worrying. And I think in this year, especially when teams are going to be more cautious with their expenditure, I can't see there being a big deadline day swoop. Not that that's really Town's style anyway, but I don't see it. I feel the way I see it is the longer the window goes on, the less likely we have to bring bodies in. And we've not been hearing whispers. I mean, not saying that we're all in the know and that we're fine-tuned with all the workings of the ins and outs of the club, but fans, media, podcasters, everyone gets that little inkling, don't they, when a signing comes in? It's very rare that someone comes in fresh out the blue and everyone's got their ears to the ground. Nothing's coming through at the moment. So, I mean, the clock's ticking. And it's worrying just the complete lack of buzz about it now. So I hope with the domestic football out of the way for a couple of weeks, that's the main focus for us now, because I don't want to see us hanging on just with this quite thin squad of players. When we've obviously got a mould that works for us, now is the time to fill those gaps. And I do fear that they're going to remain empty.
I completely agree. I cannot see any incomings in the transfer, because the club have been telling us we've got this. One of the few very little bits of communication they've done with us is that we've got all these great young lads and we're going to develop them. So I think that Coglow will go. I think that Grant will eventually go to get their costs off the book. And I genuinely think this is what we've got, because like you said, Cam, we're not being linked with anybody. We're not seeing anything. So there's nothing that's, I mean, a lot of activity will happen at the back end of the transfer window. A lot of clubs are holding their cards close to the chest, trying to use what little money they've got as effectively as they can and run the market down and run prices down. The lack of being linked and the fact they've already come out and told us that we've got all these young kids, I don't think there'll be anybody. And I think the likes of Karoma, I really admired the way that he battled up front when he was stuck up. I can't remember, it was against Norwich. He was stuck up front once when Campbell wasn't fit enough to play him longer than about 2 seconds or something. So I really liked his attitude then. But there's this Phillips lad that we signed from Everton that is coming in. This Keane Harrott. I genuinely think we won't sign anybody, and I think they will use the COVID situation as a way of almost securing the club's future by whatever money we get would go into the running of the club, because I don't think any of us know how difficult it is at the minute for the club financially, and the fact that we're just not seeing any activity commercially tells me that there's a lot of struggle going on there, that they're just not getting anything. So I genuinely, I hope I'm massively wrong and we get at least another 3 players in that you were talking about, but I just don't think it'll happen.
Oh, look, with transfers now, I'm getting more and more worried by the day. I think when we first started talking about how many transfers we wanted in, we were looking at 3, few attacking guys. To be honest, my demands have changed a little bit, seeing how reliant we are on fullbacks. We mentioned last week, if Toffolo, who's probably one of the best fullbacks outside the Premier League, I'll just slip that in there right now, and Pippa, one of them gets injured, our entire system collapses in on itself. So regardless of how much money we don't have, if we don't go out and get another fullback, this entire system will collapse when they miss a game. But it's just so late now. And the thing is, as most Town fans, I imagine, are aware, the guys we've actually brought in up until this point, this transfer window, we were all aware somewhat of every single one. All the names were linked to us by that point. Now, just a week out from transfer deadline, there is no name that I'm aware of flying about anywhere in regards to coming into the club. And usually, like I say, a pretty good finger on the pulse is podcasters and if you're down at the mat, there's always people there in the know sharing little tidbits. And if you piece it all together, normally after the fact, you can go back and see the little hints and the little names that were dropped by certain people and find out, oh yeah, they were on the ball. They knew what was going on. As of now, I don't think anyone here knows any names linked with the club. And now that's a huge warning sign. I think that could be down to needing players to leave. before we can bring new players in. It shouldn't be that way, but it is where it is. We know that. We've gone into that in great depth before. Grant not leaving would actually solve a problem up top and goals, or he would chip in, I think, with enough goals in this system to be okay. So if Grant stays, and when we can get another fullback in, I think the only piece we're missing there is an attacking midfielder. But after what happened midweek with Phil Hodgkinson and Matt Devlin going to, not the fans because we're not worth the time, it seems, other than the ATT group, but going direct to the national media in regards to asking or not demanding, but saying clubs require a bailout either from the government or the EFL or some football authority because of the effect of having no fans in the stadium will have on all clubs now throughout this season after the government U-turn. After that, I don't think there's any coincidence that won't happen this week. I think that is half telling fans that the money is tighter than we thought it might be, and we might have no signings, like Andy said. I think we're going to struggle. I think if we bring anybody in, it'll be a loan signing on a very small salary contribution. And if that's the case, it's all right. Rotherham away, who sit back and ask us to beat them. But if you go into the better teams in division, with what we've got, we are really going to struggle to score goals unless Grant's back in, and he'll be good for a few. But even that alone, it's a big ask, and you're relying on one guy again, and seasons go downhill very quickly when that happens and somebody gets injured or suspended. Or even worse, if we lose him on the final day of the transfer window and we're left with nothing. And we've seen that before with Aaron Moy. He was not replaced. As Town fans, we've seen it many, many times. And the more this goes on without players coming in or without even us hearing about it, even rumours, it gets more worrying by the day.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said about. I think this brings us on to the wider topic of communication in general, really, doesn't it? Because unfortunately, there's been a lot to talk about in and around this weekend's game, and there was only so long I think we could go without not mentioning it. I mean, that's the most lively I've ever seen in Huddersfield Town Twitter in a long time, and we hadn't even got the team sheets for another 3 hours from this weekend. And so, yeah, okay, I think we should point out the good and the bad. The good, as Ian has touched on, is that we've started seeing that programs, etc., are going to be given out to season ticket holders, things like this. We've seen movements with the AT&T group. However, there's no ignoring the storm that went down on Saturday. And this brings us back to a point that we've made in the past and that we'll make again. And let's be clear, okay, this has never been about individual cases or however high profile members may be. But when obviously the name Andy Booth was getting thrown around town Twitter, and I mean, okay, the whispers have been going on for a while. It wasn't just something that happened on Friday night. And I think we saw a lot of good from town fans there rallying round. And I think I for one have been exasperated at times towards the end of last season and beginning of this one, in that people seem to be happy with the status quo and don't seem happy to challenge things they don't think are going right. Especially when outlets like ourselves are trying to call it out and we got shut down, say, for being too negative, or I saw the word conspiracy thrown about in ample measure this weekend. But it just takes a bit of reading between the lines. And I don't really like what's going on with regards to the sponsorship. That is the single biggest no we've had this season, I think. The fact that the club's coming out and, you know, if anyone hadn't heard in previous episode, they came out and admitted that they turned down a shirt sponsorship deal because it undervalued the club and it didn't meet what they thought we were worth. And now I'm not exactly sure like what that means and how much we really are worth, given that, you know, we hung on to our second division status by the skin of our teeth last year. But championship shirt deals before COVID on average went for about £500,000. That's probably gone down a little bit now. We're down the bottom of the pecking order. So we're probably not punching, you know, the likes of 32 Red, etc., etc. But these are still going to probably be six-figure sums. It's going to be hefty money. And the club turned that down. The club turned that down because they didn't think it was good enough. And we're in the biggest, you know, financial crisis, certainly of my lifetime, probably in all our lifetimes. and nothing is for certain. And so to turn that down and then be turning people out of jobs, ordinary working people behind the scenes, not playing staff, people in the ticket office, people in liaison, and they're out of jobs now at one of the toughest times for families, for people in our area that we can even remember. And so, of course, it took the name Andy Booth to, I think, reach this problem out to most of our fan base, to the wider areas, so to those who, and there's no problem with this, but those who take an interest in the Saturday, don't really mind too much Sunday to Friday, that's your prerogative, absolutely no problem. But I like how it got everyone involved this time. People started to take a note, and I thought that was really important. It showed a lot of good that we have in the fan base. And that got shut down. But I think this brings up more questions than answers, really. And I think it exposes an ugly underbelly of what's going on here. And I've been talking about this all week. I've been talking about this probably for about 3-4 minutes now, so I'm going to let someone else get a word in. But this is probably the single biggest source of concern for me, even bigger than transfers, even bigger than a league position, because this is far removed from what the club used to be like a few years ago.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think I was sort of slightly involved in a little bit the Twitter thing on Saturday morning, and the intention behind the concern about Boothy, Boothy's the flagship name, but like you said, there's lots of other people that have gone from the club. But the thing is, we don't know. We're not being told. We've got the image of a family club. I did a video 3 years ago with Wiesman where we talked about being a family club. I was filmed for it, and it was, and we did feel like a family then. It did feel like you were part of something. Now I don't feel like part of anything, and that's going to be natural with not having gone there for a while. But the way that Devlin replied back to the chap at Andy Needham who tweeted about Boothy, I'm sorry, that was disgraceful. He could have said, oh, sorry, Andy, you're not correct. Andy Booth never has been and never will be made redundant. Thanks for your interest. But he didn't. He was snarky about it. He had a pop at him. I felt that's just absolute amateur hour communication, amateur hour PR. And that the guy is not. We're just normal guys, aren't we? We've got season tickets and that's it. I'm in the onside business squad, but nobody gives a shit about that because it probably doesn't exist anymore. But the people who put money into the club in substantial amounts have been spoken to in that way. What on earth is going on there that people think it's okay to do that? If the club are struggling, talk to us. We're your biggest stakeholder. 11,000 people have left their money in that club, and you are not talking to us about what we can do to help and dismissing it when people show concern. That's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. And it's not because people want to have the light shone upon them or because they want to be bigged up. It's because we care. Help us to help you, but don't dismiss us out of hand like that, because it's just irritated that we would have thought that Andy Booth would have been made redundant. That's a shocking piece of PR. Absolutely shocking.
That's what wound me up, Andy, this week. That's what wound me up about them going to the national media. Are we not good enough to talk to anymore? We've had an ATT meeting behind the scenes that isn't recorded. We got the minutes from the HGSA, but we're told nothing. We're told absolutely nothing. When the last time Phil Hodgkinson spoke to us, apart from in programme notes that were published 2 weeks after they were relevant? We don't get told anything. They turn up asking for handouts, right? And then we've got the CEO putting a snarky little nasty tone tweet in response to something that if Devlin is being accurate, okay, he shut it down. It's not that, like you said, that bothers me. It's not shutting it down that bothers me. The club should be using that kind of source of communication to be able to do stuff like that in a correct manner. I feel like the delete is after he got a little bit offhand on a weekend, and now Devlin's gone off on that, and it just didn't sit right. The tone was so wrong. And isn't he a business partner? Isn't like this is to a business partner? This is to a previous person that put money into the club. So not only now have we not got a sponsorship on the front of the shirt, which I find absolutely crazy when we've got two shareholders that both own companies for starters, and we don't have that anymore. And now we're going out putting in little tweets to business partners that are probably going to mean they're not going to come back to us again anyway. And then we're going asking for bailouts and handouts and a payment structure from the leagues. when it's our fault for alienating the fans so there's fewer season tickets bought. There's no sponsorship because we thought it wasn't worth what it's worth. Yet in capitalism, market price is always fair. The value reflects what it is actually worth. And now we're sending little tweets to business partners that are probably going to get them offside as well. Who are we being good to? Like, it's just error after error after error after. And that's it when people refer to it being a circus. Last year, the football side of it at the beginning was a joke, and the year before, the signings was a joke. So the circus then was on the playing style, the playing side. And now it's totally shifted from what we had with Dean Hoyle and his ownership, and he made it a community club, Andy. You say it could be because we're not in the stadium. I've not been in the stadium for 10 years. I've not been back to the UK for 10 years. Yet for the last 3 years, I've not probably missed a game because of the availability now of streaming services. But when Dean Hoyle was there, I felt connected. I felt totally connected to the club. And some of that was not even streaming games. Some of that was just listening to it on the radio to audio through a Town player. And I felt connected. I still felt connected. That's why I'm still a massive fan now after being away for so long. But it's such a massive U-turn in the last 18 months. And I think a lot of it comes down to the club flapping because of the change in finances and paying to... We never, ever, ever could have expected spending so much money on players that have now got a market value of next to nothing. It's one thing buying Meunier for over 10 million and getting 5 million back for him. But for me, that's kind of like your worst case across the board, really. If you buy someone for 10 and they lose half the value, especially if they're a youngish player like Mbenza and Diakabe. Unfortunately, we can't even get players off the books anymore, can we? There's certain players that are on wages that are so high. Like the only rumour I have seen recently was that the Pritchard one, that people were looking, but his wages might have been too high type thing. And that's no surprise if that's the case. You kind of understand that. So the club's flapped a little bit and it's just all gone off in the background. And unfortunately, what's been forgotten about and treated worse than everyone is those guys, is the fans. There's no communication from the club anymore. And the problem with that is when there is no communication, as Greg will tell you, that's because usually the news is pretty shit. If there's anything good, the first to push that out the door. We've got loads of emojis on tweets and Instagram, and as anything that happens, the positivity is shared. And when it goes radio silent, you just fear the worst because of what's gone on the last couple of seasons. Really, the disconnect is real. It is real, and I don't know if they're even aware of it. I don't genuinely know if they know how bad it is. And what more do you need to know than that?
Well, I struggle to believe that they don't realise how much of a disconnect there is now, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere to be seen. It's all people have been clamouring about. The various media outlets have been on the back of this, the various podcasts. We've been asking for better communication, and we've started to see the first tentative steps, which of course is a good thing. Like credit where credit is due. I'm aware I've used that 3 times in this episode now. I need to find a new phrase. But I've got to say that this wouldn't have come about. And what happened on Saturday would not have come about if there had been that connection with the club. People want to know, and I think people maybe were slow to realise because, you know, we're all wrapped up in various things on Monday to Friday. And so when you see that we've turned, or when it wasn't released by the club, it was released by someone who obviously works high up in the club through his personal Twitter, that we turned down as shirt sponsorship, that sort of slipped under the radar. And now I feel like that's been given the attention it deserves. And then now, obviously, the connection's been made to the fact that people have gone out the door, the fact that people have been laid off by this club and, you know, may continue to be being laid off by this club. And so I think they deserve answers more than anything. And like Andy said, people putting money into the club, whether that's as partners or as fans, they deserve to know as well. And if there had been this communication in the first place, then perhaps, and so when the only communication on the subject is a snarky remark, and I thought that was really uncalled for as well, to be quite honest. Look, no one can prove it either way. It's all hearsay. As we said, it was whispers, and then we've got one man's word to say that it wasn't happening. Do I personally believe it? No, because I think that is the logical business response to something like that. When there's outrage about a town legend being laid off, then the wise decision would be to keep him on, to save face. I don't know either way. Never will know. But for me, I don't know. The whole thing is just very suspect, and it also concerned me a little bit to see the number of town fans who, as soon as that word came out from Devlin saying that, he never was, never will be losing his job, well, people just seem to lap that up straight away. But does the way that this club has delivered its communications over the last few months in particular fill you with confidence? Are you happy to take everything at face value? And I'm not calling anyone out for lying, for being untruthful. All I'm saying is we need a bit more critical thinking. And so it disappointed me that still there's factions of the support that are happy to just jump straight on the club line. I think it's important. Fans are the largest voice at a club. I think it's important that, you know, we get on side with current affairs and work out for ourselves what is happening. And we can't just go and lap up each tidbit of information we get. We need better communication. We need better representation. Okay. And that has to come from fan base as a whole, I think. And so that has to be one voice together. And if, you know, we've still got members of the fan base who are going to call others out for being, you know, what's the word, conspiracy theorists, or that it's, you know, just drumming up controversy. Well, no, that's not the case. Something is clearly very wrong. It's not a good atmosphere around the club at the moment. And as fans, then, you know, duty to each other, really. It's a one movement thing. And I think it's important that in times like this, where something is seriously wrong, we do ask the club for answers. And I believe that the club eventually will give the answers. And the biggest question at the moment is, and the thing that encapsulates this whole loss of the identity of the community club, is that we've started to lay working people off when we're turning down money. And then on top of it, this is just the culmination of many factors in the way we've been losing money through bad transfer dealings. But this was something that was firmly avoidable. Just signing the dotted line. And if there's more to it, then okay, but we'd love to hear that.
Well, that's it, Cam, though. The communication, it has, okay, they might be aware of it a little bit, but communicate is still one-way communication. We're just being told a little bit. There's no two-way. No one can ask questions.
There's no dialogue. There's no discourse. No.
There's no questions. Why aren't they answering the questions that we want to ask? Like, even at the ATT meeting, the agenda set, I think, by the club. So there's been no opportunity for anyone to ask them questions. And then they go to the national media, and that's where they speak. Why not be answerable to us? Why can't we ask questions? Okay, you can't get Q&As at the moment in buildings so easily, but just a Zoom call, anything, just answer our questions. And they're ignoring that. They are ignoring the request to answer questions, to ask questions and answer them. And that is driving me crazy. And the longer it goes on, the more worried I get with it. Because either they aren't aware, which makes them dumb, or they are aware and they don't want to. And both of them I have huge issues with. And I don't know what's worse, but it's just like we're not important to it. It just feels like we're not important. It feels like we are not important enough, and they'll just take the money and that's it. Sweet, lovely. We'll do you'll know what we want you to know. Nice one. Whereas for the last decade, it's not been like that, or it hasn't felt like that anyway.
It's all about experience these days. It's not just about turning up, slotting 20, 30 quid now if you want to watch a match last season anyway. If you waltz up to a ground like it was maybe 30 years ago when it was pay on the day was a lot different, because clubs need that income. You lay up your money for a season card up front so they know how much money they got. So you have to be engrossed into it as a fan. And they've not got it. Cam says critical thinking there. There's no critical thinking anymore among a lot of people. Just look at politics, look at football. Stick a rosette on it and back it 100%. Don't challenge it. That's all it is these days. Little tidbits, little sayings. You see it in politics. Build back Britain better, or whatever it is. Working class club. Honesty, integrity. It's bollocks. It's meaningless bollocks, and it always will be. People lap it up. I don't understand why. I was brought up with to think about things logically. You know, fans will always do that, and unfortunately, I can't believe how many people are still lapping it up after 3 years of shite. This isn't just the last 2 full seasons. This goes back to when we got pumped by Spurs at home when it all started to go wrong. Ian's right. You are not hearing stuff because there isn't anything good to be heard. And then when the critical questions come forward, the money question comes, where's the parachute payments gone? They'll be flapping because they know the answers that will go forward will not be well received by fans. It's the same with Canal Side. Yes, I'm making a lot of suppositions here, but I'm basing it on what I know. And the questions around Canal Side are not going to lead to very good arguments. So they don't want to hold them conversations. They can do. And I don't think they want us to. I think they want us to lap it up. And it's all right, I said it on Twitter when he went on TalkSport, and I said, this is a guy who put on his Instagram that COVID was a 3 to 5 day sniffle 6 months ago, and he's bemoaning the fact that, 10,000 people yesterday have got it, another 70 or 80 dead. It's a global pandemic. You can't just demand that, fans are let back in stadiums when you know, it comes with a rigmarole of people going to the pub before and after the game, how they're getting to the game, how they're getting in and out of the stadiums. You know, if you travel through Leeds railway station through the one-way system, you should see the anger with that. Trying to do a one-way system around the stadium with a bunch of football fans just ain't going to work. So there's a reason that we're not allowed in, and I just don't understand how you can blindly follow anything in life without criticising it. So yeah, I know, Cam, you're a conspiracy theorist who believes that poor Andy Boo's getting let go. But to quote a fine man that's called Keith Lard, there's no smoke without fire, and there's a lot of smoke coming out of Huddersfield Town, and it ain't because there's a new pope being announced. It's because I just don't know if they know what they're doing, and I don't think the football world knows what it's doing. And you see it in the Premier League with all these signings coming in. They're still splurging that money, splurging it on wages, and wages is the huge thing here. This is how you reduce costings, is reducing wages. But the Premier League is still spunking that money like it's no tomorrow. And then you got arseholes like Sean Dyche and Palace's chairman. Oh, no, you won't help your local, you won't see Sainsbury's helping your local shop out, would you, if they're going bust? Well, you know, Sean, Parish at Palace, you don't loan your players to them clubs. You don't sign your players from them clubs. And the football tier system is hugely important to how we compete as a league. And the Premier League is your kind of star. It's the worldwide league, let's be honest. You know, you get people in bloody Ghana playing fantasy football leagues. You don't see any, you know, us lot playing fantasy Bundesliga, do you? So football has to change, and I would much prefer to see people like Phil and Mark Devlin leading that on that front rather than going on to talk shite. And Radio 4, I was surprised by that. They must have been desperate. Radio 4 going on about, oh yeah, we're going to need some bailout from the government. Everyone wants a fucking bailout from the government now. I work in an industry that hasn't been effectively nationalised, and we know that job cuts are coming, job pay freezes are coming. It's inevitable. You got Cineworld shutting down a lot of cinemas now, wanting a government bailout. It ain't going to happen. Unfortunately, football clubs are going to have to go bust unless we reevaluate how we run football. And, you know, I think at this moment in time, as fans, we're so removed from the process because we can't go to games, that we can't get involved, but we're just desperate for some knowledge about what they're doing. And I don't think we're getting that because they're doing anything. We saw it last season with the Danny Simpson saga. You see clubs like Arsenal who would reduce the wages and organise it with players. We haven't done that. And we're going to have clubs who are going to go bust and go to the wayside are going to have to think like that rather than just paying 30 grand a week. And that's where we're at. You know, you've got two sets of people. It's just a chalk and cheese. And there's no olive branch there. And the olive branches that we had in the past have gone. So I don't see this continuing until there is just a massive, big, honest blowout. And there is going to be a blowout. It keeps bubbling and bubbling and bubbling. And it isn't because, you know, social media is the place to go. It's the only place that we can go. And when it comes, it's going to be fucking entertaining. I'll tell you that. We've seen it before. As a fan, as someone who wants to see my club survive, number one, but wants to see it succeed, I'm not sure I trust the process remotely, to coin a phrase, because I don't think there is one.
I always presume positive intent. So I'm making a presumption that the people at the club are trying their best to get us out of this shit situation. It's a terrible situation where all their forms of income have either been chopped significantly or have dried up completely. So they're in a really difficult place, but they're not talking to us about it, and it sticks in the craw that they're not asking and keeping us up to date. And we've got situated like the Carlin Grant thing just winds me up. But this guy is sat on the touchline getting paid thousands of pounds a week for not playing for Huddersfield Town when he's contracted to do so. And every time that Corberán gets asked about him, it's a load of rubbish comes out of his gob about, you know, he's got options to go here or to stay with us. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you're doing. Why you are paying this man this money to not play for our club when you are laying people off and making people redundant that are part of the fabric of the club and have been for years. That just doesn't make sense to me. What sort of business does that? You have superstars on one side of it who you just feed money to, and people are losing their jobs at the other end of it. And you're just seriously, it's working class club. Where's the class in that? How's that working? How's that being part of a club? So you come out with your brand values, great. Let's all pretend we're Barcelona and have 3 brand values like they do, and let's have them and they'll be great. They're bullshit because they're not living them. Live them, breathe them. Come out, show some class. Talk to the people who make your club, which is us, and let's get working again. So, but while you're just sat there not talking to us and go talk sport, what are you doing on there? What are you doing on there? The worst radio station that's ever existed, and you talk to them rather than us. Oh, mate, come on, Phil. I know he's had some dreadful stuff on social media. He really, really has. And it's some of the stuff that people have said to him is disgraceful. So I understand why he's taken himself off there. But you can't just go the other end and just completely be silent and then talk to that. But we could be helping this club, not by necessarily doing a lot, but we could just be listening to them, if nothing else, and letting people know what's going on. That's the bare minimum that we expect to support us with this family club, and we're not getting it. My lad's losing connection with this club. He was very lucky that he became a season ticket holder in the season that we went up. So he thinks it's all about Premier League and Championship. He hasn't been to Macclesfield away and lost 4-0. I was there, and you can check out whether I was there. I'm not bloody Phil saying I was at 10-1 when I wasn't. I was at Macclesfield 4-0 away. And we've got people sat on their backsides who could connect with my son. That's it. Somebody said on here about connecting back with it, doing something for people. Don't talk to me, players. Get those players to pick the phone up and talk to the kids who are season ticket holders and encourage them to stay with us and give them some tips and spend 10 minutes talking to a room full of kids on Zoom and see the impact that has, and keep repeating it until we get a people who are building again around this club. Don't just sit and wait and hope that it'll go away, because it won't. No, it should be good.
That's it. Be proactive. Be proactive, not reactive. That's it, innit? And the thing with the Boothy stuff, it shows you how fans now have just had enough. Like, it's just got to that point that they so willingly jump on something that's based on tweets online. People were diving in because they've seen it happen so much recently that they just presumed it was true, and we've not been told otherwise. But I think it's more of a case that, first they came for John Eager and we said nothing, and then they came for Mark Hudson and we said nothing then, and they took Andy Boothy and we all stood up and revolted against it. We finally did it. Boothy is what causes us to unite, and like I say, for once, we are all united. The town community is one, because we can't take Andy Boothy away from us.
You're right. This is when it comes to proactive and reactive comms. The stuff that they're doing, they had Lee Clark and Mickey Collins on their post-match show. It's all well and good doing that, but that's my generation of town. That's kind of Michael Collins, Andy Olser, them lot. That's when I was growing up. Younger kids aren't going to be wanting to watch that on YouTube because they don't have a clue who they are. Who the fuck's Lee Clark? They're not going to know if they've only been watching since 2013. So, yeah, I applaud them for doing something different and doing something that not a lot of clubs will do that aren't, probably top in Premier League. And they should. That's an interesting form of entertainment, but it's not the communication. That's the communications department doing as much as they can. It's quite good, actually. And fair play to Dave and Adam at the club for doing that. But it's a bugbear. Listen, I said it last week. It's what a job is. I know what's in a way. I know what's happening. Nothing's coming out because it's not good news. But you know what? Sometimes it's best to just rip that band-aid off quickly and tell the truth. Because when you tell the truth to people, when you say, "Oh yeah, sorry lads, your train's cancelled because the Spanish train manufacturers provided a default set," and people at least understand. They're not happy about it, but they understand. If you keep covering up, they don't believe anything in the future. And I don't really believe anything anymore that comes out of the club because, like you say, Andy, they're willing to go and talk shit. Which I don't know how people listen to it, to be quite honest. 606 is bad enough having to listen to fucking Robbie Savage, but doing that, you can control it because you're not really. These people, when they're asking questions, journalists are not going to ask about in particular. They're going to ask about as a whole, and they don't have to answer them difficult questions. There's a reason probably why they didn't even go to Radio Leeds or the Examiner. Someone's got to give, and I feel like Adam Roberts in the first episode said about his lad becoming disconnected. You said it. It's people I know who are becoming disconnected. They're already realising, it's quite nice to have a Saturday where I just go out with my kids or, potter around in a garden or do something constructive. If they've got to keep us in the loop, on the hook, because come for being, I'm a negative bastard when it comes to COVID. I can't really see us back until next season at the earliest now. I think maybe April. It might be at the back end of last season, maybe this season, should I say, for some trials, March, April, May. We're not going to get into the stadium for a while, and will them 11,000 people sign up again? It's difficult. And listen, there are people going to be listening to this thinking we're going on about it like a broken record over and over and over again. We are, because naughts changed, and it needs to change. Well, B, we're doing this because we want the club to succeed. We want it to be the best it can be. That's where the criticism comes from. It doesn't come from criticism's sake. For all criticism's sake. For my mercy, I went on Facebook for the first time yesterday, just out of interest to go on the Facebook Championship banter page, whatever it is. There's people on there posting stuff about all you moaners are really disappointed that we equalised. What? Is that the kind of pathetic world that we now live in where, we can't even celebrate an equaliser in the last minute, which is still, I think, the best thing in football, or a winner in the last minute goal. It's brilliant. That's what football's about. People are battering down the hatches, and it's going to become attritional, and it's going to become fan on fan. And when it gets like that, I think I'm out.
So the only thing that remains to be spoken about, the only thing we haven't covered is what comes next on the pitch. There's been plenty of talk about what happens off it. It's quite weird. We've got to look. We'll go a week without town football after we've just got back into the swing of things. Got to watch England and Kosovo and Belgium and San Marino and all that lot this weekend instead. But when we do come back to it and we play Swansea, what's the prognosis? What do we go for?
It's going to be a total different team, isn't it? Sorry, Andy. It's going to be a total different team, this one, though. We don't know what's going to happen with the transfer market. The entire makeup of Town's team could be so different, and it will be different because we'll either have Grant or we won't have Grant. If Grant's gone, I think there will be a couple of signings in. I think that shot to the media last week was more in case he doesn't go. As it is, the team that we have today, I want backers to beat Swansea at all. I want backers to get anywhere close. Swansea I think they've got 10 points. I'm beating them 4. They look pretty good. That was up until this weekend anyway. 3-0 defeat. I think we'll be taught a lesson there. I think if we get rid of Grant though, and we bring in some guys, then anything could happen under this system. The system is exciting me. Anything could happen, but we just need to bring the extra players in to make it a bit more unpredictable when it comes to creating chances and scoring goals.
Yeah, I'd originally said in my head 1-0 Swansea, but I've just looked at the scores. Like 6-1 Spurs, Man U, 7-2 Villa, Liverpool. So it's just, we've no idea what's going to happen at a minute in football world. I'm going to change my prediction to 4-3 Town.
I'm going to say, going on this run of form, it could be anything, couldn't we? We might be back to like the old Jordan Rose, Theo Robinson days, putting 7 past Brighton and 6 past Wickham, them were days. For me personally, I don't know. I'm looking at, they've got an unbeaten run in the league. So 3 wins, 1 draw. I really can't see us getting anything off them. I'm sorry, especially with it being away. It's practically a European fixture, this, and it's a big away day. So no, for me, I'm going to go 2-0 Swansea. Obviously, this is hinging on whether Grant is in the squad. That's probably our best attacking outlet. But then again, let's not forget he's not played in donkey's years. Is he going to even be match fit? So maybe it is best if he does go, we get a couple of lads in. Again, big ask, as we've said. So yeah, unfortunately, I'd love to be positive on the back of some good performances. I'm going to have to go with 2-0 Swans.
And on that note, that's it from us. I'm also with Cam on a 2-0 defeat, by the way, in 2 weeks' time down at Swansea. But who knows anymore? We've got some time left, hopefully, to see some movement in the transfer market, which would be very, very welcome. Let's wait and see. Thank you to Andy Kaye, Cameron Pope, and Ian Kilroy for joining me, Greg Marah. Have a nice international break. Take a break from Huddersfield Town, because there's bound to be some outrage in the next week, 10 days or so. Whether that be no signings or whether that be yet another appearance by our CEO on national media rather than speaking to the fans. Thank you very much. Goodbye.